Paulsen. Chapter 6. Mysteries. Sometimes things happen in the woods that are not supposed to happen. Mysterious things that make the hair go up on your neck. Unexplainable, out-of-place things. I was sitting by a brush pile one fall morning. We'd been hunting mushrooms and I had the team in a small cart tied up some distance away, when a chipmunk came out on a log at the base of a brush pile and chuckered at me. Chipmunks are very tame, and it's common to have them eat out of your hand. I was eating a cookie, so I leaned forward and held it out, and the chipmunk would come toward me a couple of inches, and then go back, then forward and back, getting closer to the cookie piece in my fingers all the time. Suddenly a red squirrel, not much larger than the chipmunk, jumped down from the top of the brush pile, ran out on the log, and attacked the chipmunk. For part of a second I thought she was fighting for the right to get the cookie, but I was wrong. In half a moment she turned the chipmunk over, grabbed him by the throat, killed him, then dragged the chipmunk back down the length of the log to a shadow place at the edge of the brush pile and began to eat him. It was so fast, so brutal, that I hadn't time to move, and it completely without reason. Red squirrels are not carnivorous. They eat the insides of pine cones. They most decidedly do not attack and eat chipmunks. Ever. I wanted it not to be. I wanted the cute little chipmunk to still be sitting on the log coming for the piece of cookie in my hand. I wanted the red squirrel to be sitting on a limb holding a pine nut in her hand, turning it and nibbling. Not sitting back in the shadows pulling the guts out of a chipmunk. I've never seen it before or since. One moment of stark, staggering violence for no reason, with no sense, and there was gone. But I will always be able to see the squirrel looking at me over her kill, nose and front chiseled teeth and muzzle dripping blood. There are some night ghosts. Some people say that we can understand all the things if we can know them, but there came a dark night in the fall when I thought that was wrong. And so did the dogs. We had been running all morning and were tired. Some of the dogs were young and could not sustain a long run. So we stopped in the middle of the afternoon when they seemed to want to rest. I made a fire, set up a gentle, peaceful camp, and went to sleep for 4 hours. It hadn't snowed yet, so we'd been running with a 3-wheeled cart, which meant we had to run on logging roads in open areas. I had been hard-pressed to find new country to run in to keep the young dogs from becoming bored, and this logging trail was one we hadn't run. It had been rough going, with a lot of ruts and mud, and the cart was a mess, so I spent some time fixing it after I awakened, carving off the dried mud. The end result was we didn't get going again until close to 1 in the morning. This did not pose a problem except for that as soon as I hooked up the dogs and got them lined out, I was running an 8-dog team, and my headlight went out. I replaced the bulb and tried a new battery, but that didn't help. The internal wiring was bad. I thought briefly of sleeping again until the daylight, but the dogs were slamming into the harnesses, screaming to run, so I shrugged and jumped on the rig and untied it. Certainly, I thought, running without a headlamp would not be the worst thing I'd ever done. Immediately, we blew into the darkness, and the ride was madness. Without a lamp, I could not tell when the rig was going to hit a rut or a puddle. It was cloudy and fairly warm, close to 50, and it had rained the night before. Without the moon or even starlight, I had no idea where the puddles were until they splashed me, largely in the face, so I was soon dripping wet. Coupled with that, tree limbs I couldn't see hit me as we passed, almost tearing me off the back of the rig. Inside an hour, I wasn't sure if I was up, down, or sideways. And the dogs stopped. They weren't tired, not even a little, judging by the way they had been ripping through the night, but they stopped dead. I had just taken a limb in the face and was temporarily blinded. All I knew was that they had stopped suddenly and that I had to jam down on the brakes to keep from running over them. It took me a couple of seconds to clear my eyes, but when I did, I saw the light. In the first few seconds, I thought it was another person coming towards me. The light had an eerie green-yellow glow. It was quite bright and filled the whole part of the dark night ahead, down the trail. It seemed to be moving. I was in deep woods and couldn't think that a person would be doing there. There are no other teams where I train, but I was glad to see the light, at first. And then I realized the light was strange. It glowed and ebbed and seemed to fill much of the space to be a regular light source. It was low to the ground and wide. I was still not frightened and would probably not have become frightened except that the dogs suddenly started to sing. I've already talked about some of their songs. Rain songs and first snow songs and meat songs and come back and stay with us songs and even puppy training songs. But I had heard this song only once, when an old dog had died in the kennel. It was the death song, and that frightened me. They all sat. I could see them quite well in the glow from the light, the soft glow, the green glow, the ghost glow. It crept into my thinking without my knowing it, the ghost glow. Against my wishes, I started thinking of all the things in my life that had scared me. Ghosts and goblins and dark nights and snakes under the bed, and sounds I didn't know, and bodies I had found in graveyards, uncovered pale moons, and death, death, death. And they sang and sang, the cold song in the strange light. For a time I could do nothing but stand on the back of the wheeled rig and stare at the light with old, dusty terror. But curiosity was stronger. My legs moved without my wanting them to move, and my body followed them, alongside the team in the dark, holding to each dog like a security blanket until I reached the next one, moving closer to the light until I was at the front and there were no more dogs to hold. The light had gotten brighter, seemed to pulse and flood back and forth, but I still could not see the source. I took another step, then another, trying to look around the corner, deeply feeling the distance from the dogs, the aloneness. 2 more steps, then 1 more, leaning to see around the corner, and at last I saw it, and when I did, it was worse. It was a form, not a human, a large, standing form glowing in the darkness. The light came from within it, a cold, glowing green light with yellow edges that diffused the shape, making it change and grow as I watched. I felt my heart slam up into my throat. I couldn't move. I stared at the upright form and was sure it was a ghost, a being from the dead sent for me. I could not move and might not have ever moved except that the dogs had followed me, pulling the rig quietly until they were around my legs, peering ahead, and I looked down at them and had to laugh. They were caught in the green light, curved around my legs, staring at the standing form, ears cocked and their heads turned sideways while they studied it. I took another short step forward and they all followed me, then another, and they stayed with me until we were right next to the form. It was a stump. A 6-foot-tall, old, rotten stump with the bark knocked off, glowing in the dark with a bright green glow. Impossible. I stood there with the dogs around my legs, smelling the stump and touching it with their noses. I found out later that it glowed because it had sucked phosphorus from the ground up into the wood and held the light from the day all night. But that was later. There in the night I did not know this. Touching the stump and feeling the cold light, I could not quite get rid of the fear until a black and white dog named Fonzie came up, smelled the stump, snorted, and peed on it. So much for ghosts. In new snow, there can be no secrets, no mysteries. Everything leaves tracks. It is possible to see where owls took the mouses when it tried to run across the snow in the night. The perfect pattern of the owl's wings feathers hitting the powder snow as the bird dropped on the mouse is there. You can see the intricate necklace patterns of tracks made by a hunting ermine as it looks for mice, going down into the undersnow cities, and the mice have in the swamp grass during the winter, then exploding out on top again with the kill, and down again for another one. But the tracks are always there, and they always tell the truth. But once I came on a clearing about 40 feet across. Dead in the middle of the clearing, a fox had taken a grouse. On a cold winter night and days, grouse make small caves in the snow to keep from freezing, and if they are caught in the caves, they can be taken. It is easy to find the holes they make when they plummet into the snow, but very hard to catch them off guard, because when they hear the sound of someone or something coming through the snow, they explode up and out into a white cloud. But a fox had taken one in its cave and eaten it. The feathers were there. The tracks of the kill were there. But there were no tracks leading out to the center of the clearing. No fox tracks around the grouse cave. Nothing. No tracks leaving, no tracks coming. I tied the dogs off to a tree and took the snowshoes from the sled and spent the better part of an hour trying to work it out, moving around in the new snow. There were no fox tracks anywhere in the neighborhood. I moved out into the larger and larger circles and could find no fox tracks, no signs that a fox had come from anywhere or gone anywhere. The more I looked, the less I could find. There could not have been a fox, simply could not have been one, and yet there was. Somehow. One fox, one grouse, in the middle of a clearing and nowhere else on earth. A quick death, a handful of feathers, then nothing. Cedar waxwings, small cardinal-like birds that are largely gray, come in the first part of spring. You'd think over the 1,000, perhaps millions of years they have been migrating that they could have worked it out to arrive in the North Country at the right time. But they always come early, while there's still snow and no real food for them. When we see them coming in small flocks, we put out suet for them. They hit the kennels and steal meat, but they would rather have berries and seeds. High bush cranberries taste, according to my grandmother, like somebody's old socks. Perhaps they aren't that bad, but they do smell awful when they're cooked, and it takes a lot of sugar to make high bushberry cranberry jelly worth eating. Maybe because of the way they taste, the berries are rarely eaten by game in the early fall when they come ripe. They freeze, hang, beautifully red and luscious looking. For the whole winter, the color truly is wonderful against the snow. The grouse start to eat them as the winter wears on, and they care less about the taste. The berries are still there in the spring, still frozen, and I happened to be sitting near a high bush cranberry stand when a flock of cedar waxwings arrived one spring afternoon, and that is when I saw another mystery that still haunts me. I had always thought of birds as not terribly intelligent, although hawk did much to change my mind. I never thought of them as counting or paying as much attention to each other. But the cedar waxwing didn't just descend on the tree willy-nilly. There was a great order in how they settled in rows on limbs, 8 or 10 birds in each row. When the bird closest to the berries in each row would take a berry carefully and hold it out to the bird next to him in his beak, that bird would take the berry and turn and pass it on to the next, who would take it and turn it and give it to the next, and so on until the bird at the end got his berry. When the first bird would take another berry and pass it on, and so on until each bird in the line was holding a berry. When each bird was holding a berry, they all faced front and ate them, working the pulp off until they got the meat and spitting out the center pit. Then they would start over. My wife says it's because they hate the taste of the berries and pass them on, hoping to get a sweeter one, and of course there aren't any. They're all sour. But she's just guessing, and I still do not know why they do it. The dough was something that I could never believe, even when I saw it. It happened on a night run. It had been cold, but not deep cold, between 20 and 30 below at night, and very still. I was thinking of summer because my feet were cold. My toes had been frostbitten and they get cold easily. Thinking of summer or Jamaica or the inside of a red stove helps. I was